How does one learn wisdom? How does one learn to be wiser? How does one learn to be more mature? How does one learn to become a fully grown adult? Most people are children walking around in bodies of adults. The only way to do that is to observe oneself with honesty and without judgment. When you can observe yourself with brutal honesty and complete lack of judgment, you will start seeing yourself think things, do things, want things in certain patterns and loops where the specifics might change and will change, but the general tendency remains constant. When one can see that, naturally, at this point in one's growth, one needs to start asking the question of whether this thought, this desire, this conviction is indeed correct or is indeed worthy of pursuing. We keep chasing various things with a very high conviction that the attainment of that thing is going to make us happy. In many cases, the attainment of those things actually leads to greater unhappiness further down the road. But by that time, we've left no room for ourselves to really evaluate, really second guess, really do a postmortem of all of our desires. We never ask ourselves, what have we learned? What should we stop doing? What should we start doing? All of those things that we apply in the corporate space, we don't apply to ourselves. We just keep going on and on in this loop of I want this other thing, I want this other thing. There are always good reasons why we want this thing and why that is going to make us happier, why that is going to satisfy us, etc., etc. Perhaps one of the best things that can happen in one's life is for one to start seeing the way we fool ourselves at an early age. I'll tell you, I know so many people who are in their 60s, 70s who don't understand a lot of these things. So again, they might be 60, 70 years old, but they're children. They have had a lot of suffering in their life, mainly because of being a child, and they cause a lot of suffering in other people's lives for that same reason. In my case, I was just lucky, I guess. I can take zero credit for it. I don't take credit personally for anything that's good about me, anything that's exceptional about me, because what I have realized is I did not choose it. Now I can give you reasons if I wanted to feel good and smart, why I chose to be something, but that would be my ego talking. I would just be trying to feel good. Anyway, with the caveat that I did not choose this, I'll just share one personal story. When I started my career here in the US, it was like lots of problems, and it was 2001. There were no jobs. I needed a visa, so that it was even worse. And I was not that good either. So the good companies were rejecting me. I did not have any kind of tier one college or university on my resume. I was basically not in a very good place. And somehow, because I tried a lot and I'm fairly good at interviewing, I was able to find some jobs, whereas many people with my background or even a better background could not find a single job. I got some jobs, but they were not paying very well. During that time of struggle, you know what? I had a figure in mind, which is like, man, if my annual compensation is $80,000, which wasn't a big number because the median salary, even during those times, if you had a master's in computer science and you got a software engineering job, it was $67,000 to $70,000. I was earning about half of that. And the number I had in mind is, oh, if I reach 80K, all my problems will be solved. I'll be happy. I think I reached 80K in 2005, 4 years after I got my master's in CS, still a software engineer. At this point, I'm 26 years old. And it's like, yes, this is great. And by the way, it required a lot of work to get to 80K, but we leave that aside for a second. I'm now at 80K. And then I remember I'd made this promise, or I had this thought of, if I reach 80K, my life will be so much better and I'll be so much happier. Basically, I had this fantasy, I'm done. This is great. I'll be able to send this much money home because my family needed money to support various things and whatever else. I'll actually have an apartment that I can live in. So I asked myself, okay, 80K, great. How much happier am I right now compared to that fantasy in 2001 of having 80K? And I realized I was not much happier at all. I was probably worse. For me, that was like, oh, wait, that's interesting. I don't want to frame this as some big epiphany when I was 26. It wasn't that. But it prompted me down this path of evaluating and not completely trusting my own thoughts and these fantasies of, oh, if X happens, then I'm going to be happy. Despite this knowledge, I then at some point went out and got a Porsche 911 because that was my goal. I'd intentionally been driving bad cars that cost $2,000-3,000 for many years until I think 2010. So by this time I was at Google, and now I was making upwards of 200K. I bought one and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for sure. Drove in the hills of the peninsula and South Bay on weekends. It was amazing. But then again, my expectation of how happy I'm going to be was very different from the reality of having this thing. And then I started noticing all these thoughts like, very few 30-year-olds drive a 911. So, yeah, I've made it. I'm special. I'm even noticing myself going for groceries and somewhere secretly hoping people see me get out of my 911. I'm noticing these things about myself. I'm like, what am I doing? And why am I doing this? And again, I don't mean to say that was an epiphany. None of these are epiphanies that just flip the switch to, oh, from henceforth, I'm going to behave differently. But I'm giving you purposely embarrassing examples, right? Most people won't even feel like they can share. It doesn't stop just because you observed it the first time, which is why I say we keep repeating this. And in my case now, the only thing I can really say is I've reached a stage where I understand the hilarity of it. It doesn't mean I can always prevent myself from chasing something, but I will say that having seen myself do these hilarious things for this long, at this point in my life, I am, for the most part, not chasing much. Every once in a while, I still succumb to the chasing, but for the most part, I'm not chasing much. When I do succumb to the chasing, I am at least aware that that is what is happening. And I'm fully aware and I'm okay with it, right? Again, the don't judge yourself is also important.